Mating and temperament. All sorts of variables enter into the pairing activities of mates. Parental prescription, economics, social stratum, educational level, national origin, ethnic origin, physique, and physiology. But a more powerful force, one that is more powerful than all of these, is the force of temperament. Other things equal: parental prescription, economics, social stratum, and so forth. The mates will pair according to temperament. It will be profitable to them to look at how the types pair off and how the four temperament groups act as mates. First, and this is said cautiously, 2 decades of type watching. Kiersey began type watching in 1956. Reveal the astonishing fact that people are attracted to and marry their opposites with high frequency. Furthermore, if they have botched up the mating somehow, after 10 to 20 years, the spouses, just as often as not, are again attracted to and marry their opposite. Of course, the notion that one is attracted to one's opposite is a well-known cliche, but it is a cliche that few seem to believe. Witness the advent of mating bureaus and especially the entry of computer scanning for compatibility. They reveal a much more believed cliche. Like is attracted to like. But it is the bureau and the computer that pairs like with like. People do not very often do it on their own. Now, this is not to say that spouses that are alike don't get along with each other and don't stay together. Perhaps they do both. It means, rather, that they don't attract each other. Opposites do. We might wonder why. Carl Jung said that opposites not only attract, but even fascinate each other. He had a sort of spooky conception of the opposite, which he called the shadow. One casts a shadow, as it were, of all that one is not, or rather, of all that one has not developed, expressed, or lived out in oneself. It's as if, in being attracted to our opposite, we grope around for that rejected, abandoned, or unlived half of ourselves, like a worm cut in two that goes wiggling around trying to join up with the other end. So the search for our other side is built in, imprinted, a priori, and quite imperative, just like sexuality and territoriality. No, we don't have to buy Jung's reductionist localization theory along with the imperative or a priori. It's okay to posit an, oh my lord, a priori behavior as long as one doesn't localize it and thereby commit the homunculus or ghost in the machine fallacy. You know, these words shouldn't be that hard, to be totally fair here. Like, these are not words that people just use regularly. Homunculus. Anyway, we're gonna go on and stay together to the hard words. I appreciate you. So people instinctively seek out their opposites, or if Jung has his way, their complements. The question is, should they? Do such matings pay off? The answer is yes. But yes, if there is no attempt to change the spouse, No, if there is an attempt to change the spouse. This ambiguous answer, yes, but ushers forth the grand hypothesis regarding the primary source of ruptured marriages, the Pygmalion Project. In our Pygmalion Project, we go to all the bother of finding and promising to care for and take care of a person quite unlike ourselves, in some cases exactly opposite in all respects, and then pull all the stops in our attempt to transform our spouse into our own image. It is as if the marriage license is construed as a sculptor's license, giving each spouse the warrant to chisel away until the other becomes the spitting image of the sculptor. Consider the supreme irony. Were each spouse successful, both Ovid and Shaw would turn over in their graves. Of course, there is no way to change our spouse into ourself, but the attempt to change the other is what does the damage. By chipping away on our spouse, we say, "You are not what I want. I want you other than you are." Clearly, what the spouse is not appreciated, even though it is precisely what the spouse is that was the attraction in the first place. Here it is tempting to see us all having a strong desire to recast ourselves, to be reborn, so we find what is in effect raw material, the shapeless stone, that which is most distant from us. Our sense of achievement, then, all the greater the transformation of our spouse. Are we not all Pygmalion? Pygmalion. There we go. Suppose this seemingly ubiquitous desire to change our spouse is resisted. Then, and in that degree, can opposites live happily ever after? Maybe. If we can recognize our natural impulse to instruct our spouse on the kinds and degrees of change he or she should make, pause each time the impulse strikes, and button our lip, then some interesting phenomena may begin to take place. For example, if we suspend our activities towards trying to force our spouse to change in our direction, to become more logical or more responsible or more spontaneous or more meaningful, then we might, just might, come to appreciate that which attracted us in the first place. Notice that it isn't that we want our spouse to abandon spontaneity or whatever he or she has in abundance. Rather, we want him or her to take up our task, the achievement of competence, for instance. What we may fail to realize is that in taking up our aim, our spouse must abandon his or her own. We cannot have our cake and eat it too. We might ask for some clarification of what is meant by opposite in the context of temperament theory. In a very broad sense, thinkers are opposite of sensibles. In the Jungian framework, thinkers are opposite of feelers. Judicials are opposite of perceptives, and extroverts are opposite of introverts. Of course, there is no such thing as an extroverted type per se. There are 8 extroverted types, as there are 8 introverted types. Extroverts can be radically different from each other, just as thinkers and judicials. Opposite types are as follows. back up on here. And you can see them without me having to say all that. There we go. Now it appears that opposite types are more attracted to each other than opposite temperaments. The ENFP, for instance, seems to be more drawn to the ISTJ than he or she is. Let's see. Drawn to the INTJ. Another example, the ENTJ seems to select the ISFP more frequently than the INFP, and it may be the case that he will go for the ISFP sister type, the ESFP, more readily than for an INFP. Now another rather important consideration ought to be surfaced regarding quality of fit in mating. Not everybody wants the same thing in a marriage. The NFs may want, or say they want, a deep and meaningful relationship, but the NTs, SPs, and SJs are not very interested in either the depth or the meaningfulness of their relationships. And added to that would be hard put to say what deep or meaningful means in the marriage context. The question is then, just what do the types want when they mate? Our cue must come from the nature of the person that is attractive. Perhaps a glance at the most fitting activity or occupation of each of the types would cast some light on the attraction. Now, it may seem excessively fortuitous that the hundreds of work categories can be neatly summed up by a mere 16 vocations, magically to conform to the motive base of each type. Well, yes, the work of best fit is a metaphor, of course, but it may give us an image of the sort of work in which each type would get its jollies. The types are paired as opposites. Here we're going to show it to you. It's going to be so much better. There we go. Following with our thesis that opposites attract, then the architect is attracted to the seller, and the seller to the architect, the inventor to the conservator, and so on. Again, we must think broadly of these categories, else we lose sight of the intent. All right, let's see. So it's pretty much going to read all 16. So I'm going to put them all together. I'm going to stop right here, about halfway through. And this is Mating and Temperament. We've been reading the book Please Understand Me, Character and Temperament Types by David Kiersey and Marilyn Bates. I appreciate you being with me. Thank you for listening.